Hey guys, this is Rob, the INTP, and wanted to start an interesting conversation about the subject of introverted intuition in the INTP. Yes, you heard that correctly. I said introverted intuition, not extroverted intuition. And again, this is just an open-ended conversation. I don't think I've arrived at any hardcore conclusions of this, or about this. But I'm going to put a link to a video from the Type Tips channel below, which gives kind of an overview of all eight, how INTPs use all eight of the cognitive functions. And I think this is coming from the Socionics Model G for basically what would be considered the MBTI INTP profile in Socionics. I think in Socionics it is INT lowercase j, which is super confusing. But anyways, and basically from my understanding, Socionics Model G seeks to describe how each personality type uses all eight of their functions, not just the core four that they're, more conscious of. And what's interesting when you look at the Type Tips video and when you look more into this stuff, it appears that there are actually other functions that each personality type has that they're strong at, that are not in their top four function stacks. But the issue is, because of their leading cognitive functions, they do not prefer or value the use of these other functions that are strong but not in their primary top four, stack of main functions. And looking at the research that they put together, it appears that INTPs apparently have pretty strong introverted intuition. And I have some personal experiences that I'll kind of allude to a little bit later in this video about where I think that I've kind of experienced this in a more conscious level occasionally. But first thing that's really interesting, so after I looked into this socionic stuff, and I'm pretty much well aware that it seems there's a pretty limited amount of actual, empirical evidence to support socionics. If anybody has links to any papers or anything or studies, let me know. But, I'm taking all this with a grain of salt. I'm not thinking this is 100% fact yet, but I can see some evidence, at least anecdotally within myself in my experience. So quickly, one of the things I did was I went to decided to take a couple cognitive function tests. So these are tests that just strictly look to see how strong you are at specific cognitive functions, and it's less about trying to, pinpoint what kind of MBTI type you are. So the first one I went to was celebritytypes.com, their cognitive function test. They have a YouTube channel. They've posted quite a bit of content that people generally agree with. So I took their test, and mind you, I've taken their test multiple times. And the other thing to keep in mind is when I took these tests, this was coming out of my curiosity to find what my, inclination towards introverted intuition was, or my strength towards it. So keep in mind that I had that in my consciousness while I was taking these tests. So I was pretty aware of, a lot of these tests try to mask what kind of cognitive function they're testing for with the way they set up the question. But if you understand the cognitive functions, you kind of understand what they're trying to test you for when you read through that. Especially if you're an intuitive person, you can kind of see behind the lines of what the question is. So you can say, okay, this is a question about introverted intuition. So for example, they might say something about, oh, do you feel strongly drawn towards symbols and mystical things? And, so you're like, okay, that's totally an NI thing, right? So what I want to say right up front is when I took these tests, if I ever did become conscious of a question that I thought was about introverted intuition, I just want you guys to know that I basically was very, I approached that question with a lot of scrutiny, and I typically lean towards the conservative answer for myself for these questions, because what I didn't want to do is be like, oh, so apparently introverted intuition is a big thing with INTPs. So anytime I see a question about introverted intuition, I'm just going to answer it at the, that I strongly agree with it or whatever. I purposely was very, conservative and try to be very discerning and honest with any answers to these cognitive tests, just to make sure that I'm not kind of being biased because I heard this new information about NI and INTP. So just know that. So looking at the screen, you can see, and I've taken this test multiple times for celebrity types, even before I heard about this introverted intuition stuff. And pretty much consistently, I score pretty high on introverted intuition on this thing. And it typically is really close to my introverted thinking score, which kind of aligns with, if you look at the type tips video that I linked to, it kind of aligns with the socionics model G that basically says your strongest function is introverted thinking, then introverted intuition, even though you don't value it. Because you're skeptical of it and you don't like this idea of just, because we favor NE, we like to go from one idea to the many. We don't like to just sit there and, and be driven by a hunch that kind of pulls together multiple ideas into one, general thought or kind of eureka moment. We tend not to trust that. But that doesn't mean that we're not strong at that function. We just don't like it. And it's funny. I actually saw a Reddit thread it was an INTP Reddit thread the other day, and it was funny because somebody made a post mentioning, "Hey, does anybody else feel kind of creeped out by NI and feel kind of creeped out by people who have NI as a dominant function?" And I gotta admit, like I do kind of resonate with that. Like NI has this really mystical, almost supernatural feel to it, and that's probably an exaggeration and maybe even a misconception of what it actually is. But I think having introverted thinking as our strongest function and really basing things in logic and kind of reasoning and rational thinking, we tend to be very skeptical of things like introverted intuition. Even if we have a eureka moment about something, it's typically kind of like we'll typically map it back to some logical system to make sure that it is aligned. But so interesting here. So also pretty high was introverted feeling, which again for me it's a little bit harder for me to embrace introverted feeling on a conscious level because this extroverted feeling in my last function and as the fourth function in my stack is always kind of fluttering about and like screwing up my perception on things. But I think it makes sense. Logically for introverted feeling to be kind of a high priority for INTPs because you're constantly with your introverted thinking and trying to be logical and rational. You often end up, when you're living in a society where the dominant types are SJs and not necessarily focused on introverted thinking. You find yourself having to defend your beliefs quite often, and that you often find that your beliefs are quite different from those of other people. And I think most INTPs also value maintaining their kind of sense of individualism and not just conforming to the whole. And so I think as a result of our introverted thinking and how much we value it, our introverted feeling tends to we tend to become a little bit more conscious of it. So that's just my take on it. So of course this is just one test, so I decided to take another. I took the Dario Nardi cognitive function test as well. This is on, and I'll put a link to all these tests below if anybody else wants to take them for themselves. But again, taking all this stuff with a grain of salt, let's get multiple data points to see if we have any correlation. So took this test, the Dario Nardi site, again, being super conservative with any questions that I felt were trying to measure NI strength. So, just really not making sure that I'm not being super generous about how I feel about or my strengths in those areas, to the degree where I may have actually capped my score for introverted intuition, maybe because I'm being so skeptical. But so looking at this test, I mean, no surprise, introverted thinking is the biggest thing, followed by introverted feeling. So again, I think because we're we're so steeped in logic, and the rest of the majority of the world is not. I think, it's a lot. It makes sense that we would become more aware of our introverted feeling and start to kind of value that more. So after introverted feeling is extroverted intuition. That makes sense. Actually, in this one, my introverted sensing came out pretty high, which, of course makes sense. But then, like, even higher than my extroverted feeling is introverted intuition again. It says limited use here, so they've actually, you can see on this test, they've actually, they rank you as either having excellent use, good use, or limited use. But the introverted intuition was higher than my extroverted feeling, which is really interesting. So yeah, I mean, again, take that stuff as a grain of salt, but I think from my perspective, I definitely think that NI seems to somehow be at work and part of what the INTP experience is. And before I close out, just to give some anecdotal examples of how I think I've experienced this in my life. So I think that most of the times that I feel that I have experienced NI, or what I constitute to feel like NI, which to me NI feels like a eureka moment where you have you've kind of been brooding over a certain question, or trying to find understanding about a certain topic or subject matter, usually something that's a little bit deeper and more complex than is readily accessible to your logical system. So you're just kind of piecing together the information, and then it usually it's something that I'm studying really, really, really intensely, and I'm really trying to figure something out. And then, due to time constraints, I have to like stop doing it, and then I have to like go do something else. And what ends up happening is, a couple days later, I'm like getting ready to go to bed, and all of a sudden it just hits me like a ton of bricks, and there's like an emotional impulse behind it as well, where it's just like this flood of it's almost like almost feels like being enlightened. Again, it's like a eureka moment. It's like, oh my God, everything clicks, and I just totally understand this complex problem that I've been trying to solve, and it all makes sense, and it all lines up, and I totally can break this down and explain it every which way because I just totally understand it. And even though I can trace back the process of me collecting all of the data points and analyzing them, as far as having that that central kind of collapsed understanding of it at a very deep level, I'm not able to necessarily map that process out of how that happened. And the evidence of this is that I can't these eureka moments are not something that I can just manufacture out of thin air. Like if somebody said, "Hey, give me a big idea about this thing tomorrow," I might have a big idea, I might not. It might be in the next couple of minutes, it might be a week from now, and too late. But, again, I can't control when I just have this deep understanding of something. There's some things that, for the most part, a lot of things that I, look into, I can just kind of read, do research, gather information, and slowly but surely I start building these systems of understanding, and I kind of understand how everything works, yada, yada. But there's sometimes things like, and to be more specific, I think a lot of these eureka moments where they end up coming into play is for things that are not necessarily, that are a little bit more difficult to map out as a logical system. For example, understanding some part of human behavior. Why do humans tend to do this? We can look at, some psychology reports, we can look at blah, 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 but sometimes these things don't have a clear, concise answer. But then I will make the connection, or just kind of, and again, I think what separates NI from NE is NE. When you're using NE, typically when I'm using NE, I'm pretty conscious of it, and I can it's kind of like this explosion of ideas and connections between seemingly disparate subjects, but you can kind of see the connective thread, and it's very natural for me to, make connections to things that don't seem related on the surface, but I see the tissue and I can extrapolate out and expound on things and kind of move an understanding of one thing into another context and see how it lines up and things like that. But I think with the NI stuff and these eureka moments, the thing is, they typically come up when I'm not thinking about that subject. That's the distinctive factor. And I think I would love to hear if there's any, INTJs or anything like this that are listening to the channel that can kind of confirm or deny that this is something that they are familiar with. It's like, like extroverted intuition, I'm aware of when I use it and I use it on purpose. And sometimes it just kind of happens kind of all the time throughout my day. It happens when I'm trying to talk. I go off on these random tangents. I'm actually surprised that I've been pretty much on a one-track mind for this video because I tend to bounce around quite a bit. But that's the difference. Extroverted intuition is normally something that I am very conscious of, and I can follow my reasoning of, to other people it may seem like these random things, but to me, I can map back why I feel like they're connected, and I can express why I think they're connected. What I perceive to be NI, again, this is something that it's out of my control, and very often it's something that I thought about deeply 2-3 days ago, but I wasn't thinking about it at the moment that the eureka moment happened. And sometimes it'll be sometimes something will trigger it and sometimes not. And the thing that makes introverted intuition, in my opinion, more distinct than extroverted intuition is that it's like this is a bad analogy, but it's like a 7-layer burrito, right? Like there's so many layers of understanding with NI. It's not just like, oh, these 2 things are connected or these 3 things are connected. No, it's like I understand the kind of, how do I put it into words? It's like I understand the inner workings of this thing in every which way, from every angle, on multiple levels, to the point where I feel like there's nothing about this that I don't understand. It's almost like walking into an abandoned hotel with high ceilings and there's no lights on, and you're just trying to figure out where's the lights, and then all of a sudden, for some reason, the electricity kicks back on and the whole room is illuminated and you can see everything. You can just see it. You can just look. It's right there in front of you. But, so it's kind of like that. Whereas NE, I think, is a little bit more surface level. It's not super duper deep. It's just like, okay, these 2 things are connected because of X, Y, Z. It's very clear. So yeah, that's my take on it. I think this video has already gone about 10 minutes longer than I wanted it to, but I thought this was a super interesting topic, and I would love to hear anybody else's POV or experience about with NI, especially if you're an INTP, and let me know if any of these things resonate with you or if you have similar experiences. Also, if you take the test that I've linked to below, please share your results in the comments. I would love to see if there's any kind of correlation or pattern between my experiences and my scores and what you guys come up with. So till the next time, this is Rob, the INTP, apparently with some NI maybe, I don't know, but until next time, I'll talk to you guys soon. Peace.